The Minister for Defence Material.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I think the people of Australia that are listening to this debate would appreciate the fantastic transformation that's happened inside the Liberal Party. Suddenly the Liberal Party has discovered cost of living pressures, because they certainly didn't when they were in government. The Leader of the Opposition quoted a couple of statistics, and I'm happy to quote a few more. In the last term of the Howard government, the cost of the average family basket of groceries went up by 20%, up from $232 to $281. That's between 2004 and 2007. At the same time, interest rates went up 10 times in a row. And as a result of that, in 2007, 10,000 Australian families had their home repossessed. And nowhere did this hurt any more than in my electorate of Blaxland, where at its peak in 2007 we had 60 homes a month being repossessed. 60 homes a month, that's 3 homes a day for every working day being repossessed, because Australian families couldn't cope with the cost of living pressures brought upon them by 10 interest rate rises in a row. And on top of that, you had work choices, where more than 1 million Australians had their wages or entitlements cut. And what was the response of the Liberal Party then? What was the response of the then Liberal Party Prime Minister? Australians have never been better off. Australians have never been better off. Give me a break, Mr Deputy Speaker. If there were gold medals handed out for failing to help Australian families with the cost of living, then the Leader of the Opposition would look like Mr T. The Leader of the Opposition would look like Mr T. So I welcome a debate on cost of living, because it gives the government the opportunity to expose this hypocrisy for what it is, and the ludicrous scare campaign that has now been run by the Leader of the Opposition. The government understands that Australians struggle with cost of living pressures. They always do. And we would never be so stupid as to say Australians have never been better off. We understand that Australians always struggle with cost of living pressures. That's why we stimulated the economy, to protect Australian jobs, to protect jobs and keep food on the table. That's why we increased the pension. That's why we introduced 3 tax cuts in a row. That's why we introduced the 50% childcare rebate, added uniforms to the education tax rebate. That's why this year's budget provides extra support for parents of teenagers in high school. And it's also why we're taking action to bring the budget back to surplus as quickly as we are. The fact is, Mr Deputy Speaker, there is only one party in this parliament that has a plan to deal with the economic challenges that confront us as a nation. The Liberal Party, it must be said, has not had an economic plan for this country since Peter Costello left the building about 3 years ago. The challenge of the last term was to stop the Australian economy going into recession when the rest of the world did. The challenge of this term is to manage the boom. Now, economic booms driven by the mining sector will bring with it enormous wealth. But like the last one, it will also bring plenty of challenges. Unemployment is already low, and as the economy reaches capacity, skill shortages will grow. When demand for skilled labour outstrips supply, it puts pressure on wages and on inflation and on interest rates. And that's why the measures that you see in the budget are so important, to boost the number of skilled workers and to increase the number of people in the workforce. It's particularly important, Mr Deputy Speaker, in an electorate like Blaxland, where despite the fact that the economy is so strong, we have unemployment that is double the national average, teenage unemployment that is still above 25%, and we have 16% of the people who live in my electorate on government income support. There's the challenge. We've got an economy that needs workers to manage cost of living pressures, and there are still parts of Australia where unemployment is high, where participation rates are low, and where there are a lot of people on income support. Now, compare the two parties when it comes to tackling this economic challenge. In the budget, you see a package to increase the number of skilled workers in the economy, something like a $3 billion package. This isn't the first time there's been a skills package in the budget. It's come year after year after year. And you're already starting to see the impact of the investments we're making in skills and education. For example, there's been a 15% increase in the last year in the number of Australians starting an apprenticeship or a traineeship. The number of people starting trade cadetships last year went up by almost 22%. Between 2009 and 2010, university offers for people from low SES backgrounds has increased by 8.8%. Now, where's the opposition's plan? Barely mentioned jobs when the Leader of the Opposition got up to give his budget reply. Mentioned the word skills once. Didn't even release a skills policy at the last federal election. Their only policy, Mr Deputy Speaker, was to cut $2 billion from apprenticeships and scrap the trade training centres being built around the country. Now, this is the challenge that confronts us, managing the boom. We have a policy to increase participation rates, to increase the number of skilled workers in the economy, and there is nothing on the other side. But it's not the only challenge that the economy faces. There are other big challenges on the horizon. The ageing of the population is just one of them. By the time I'm 65, the number of people that age or older will have doubled, and that means healthcare costs will increase, the cost of funding the pension will increase, there'll be fewer taxpayers to pay the bills. The government's job is to help meet this challenge. That's why health reform is important. That's why increasing the superannuation guarantee is important. That's why increasing workforce participation is so important. Beyond that, there's the challenges that we confront with the changes to our region. The challenge of converting the mining boom into a services boom. We stand now, Mr Deputy Speaker, on the edge of the biggest middle class the world has ever seen. By the end of this decade, Asia will have more middle-class consumers than the rest of the world combined. And this provides an enormous opportunity for Australia, an enormous opportunity for the Australian economy, an enormous opportunity for all Australians. The challenge for us here, as members of this parliament, is to ensure that Australia makes the most of it. The competition for this market will be fierce, and we need to prepare now. Doing well here is the key to increasing the standard of living of all Australians and their quality of life. Doing well here is the key to the future of Australia. And what do we hear from the opposition on this? Absolutely nothing. What do we hear from them on the big challenges that confront the Australian economy? Absolutely nothing. The Leader of the Opposition takes his job literally. I've got to give it to him, Mr Deputy Speaker. He takes his job literally. He opposes everything and he stands for nothing. The only thing he stands for is election. And he proved that. He proved that in his budget reply, where he talked a lot about vision, but he didn't offer any. The only vision he's got is of the Lodge, Mr Deputy Speaker, because all he talked about was an election. Leader of the Opposition has got all the vision of Mr Magoo.
Remind the member for Longman he's not to
Nothing in his budget reply about the challenges this country faces or what we need to do to meet them. I tell you this, Mr Deputy Speaker, the people of Australia want a leader who does understand the challenges ahead. They don't want a Mr Magoo. What we got instead, Mr Deputy Speaker, what we get every day in this parliament is Mr Magoo and a dodgy scare campaign. Running around the country day after day, scaring Australians, going to Whyalla, saying that the carbon tax will wipe them off the map, going to Geelong, saying it'll be the final nail in the coffin of the manufacturing industry, going to Weet-Bix, saying that it'll destroy breakfast, going to the fish markets, saying that it'll kill all the fish in the sea. Mr Deputy Speaker, it reminds me a lot of that bloke who ran around America demanding to see the President's birth certificate. A hysterical nonsense scare campaign. What we have now, Mr Deputy Speaker, is a Leader of the Opposition. A Leader of the Opposition looks like Donald Trump without the hair. All Trump, no toupee. All Trump, no toupee. And said it today again where he said groceries would go up by 5%. when in fact the CPRS modelling said it would go up by 0.6 to 0.8, exaggerating things again by 6 to 8 times. No wonder the people of Australia don't believe him.
Has expired.